Welcome back, y'all, to our confidence series with Nia Zamar and Curls and Confidence. We're super excited to have this conversation, but would like to also say it's about to get pretty emotional, but we feel like this is a really important topic that we needed to address within this series. We want to talk about mental health and really talking about confidence still, but like what the relationship with mental health is to confidence within our everyday life.
Mental health is defined as being able to balance all aspects of your life physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So that is your ability to cope with the everyday stresses of life, making decisions, and being able to cope in difficult situations. It's also being able to express yourself, express your needs and your desires.
And I really wanted to talk about mental health. I had brought it up to Christina because it's something that's really near and dear to my own heart. It's a big part of why I started my company, a big part of why I do the type of beauty work that I do is connected to wellness. I feel even vulnerable talking about it, and I feel like that's the point, is the fact that I feel so vulnerable talking about it is why we need to have more conversations. But sharing a little bit of my own personal story, I started my company, Nia Zamar, specifically because my older sister, who was someone I really looked up to, and she was like the beginning of me even like thinking about makeup and beauty. I remember like sitting on the toilet seat and like watching her do her makeup, and she was known to be a beautiful person. So she did pageants and won them. She did photo shoots. Like she represented like my first memories of like thinking about beauty. And when she was 22, she committed suicide, and that for me, it's still really difficult, and it's many years later now, but I just couldn't wrap my mind around how someone who was so liked and so beautiful could be struggling in the ways that I know that she was. Someone who, I guess there's this assumption that I had, or even still have in some ways, that like once we attain these like external joys, that then we'll be able to like be okay internally. So I feel like she's someone who I thought about as being really confident because of the ways that she was able to access beauty. But then I now understand better like the relationship between mental health and how we could be beautiful and like look great and seem to be confident but be struggling silently on the inside. And I think it's really important that we take away some of the stigma around mental health by having these conversations and having them openly, so that we all feel more comfortable having these discussions. And it's interesting now that I'm older and in my 20s, I'm seeing some of that for myself, where people, we talked about this a little bit, but like I do a lot of speaking things. So I run workshops and do that kind of thing. So people are like, well, you speak in front of like large groups, so that must mean that you don't have anxiety. And anxiety is something that I really struggle with. It's something that I have taken medication for in the past. It's something that I get anxiety attacks. It's a real thing for my life. And people will tell me that it's not real because they're like, well, you seem like you're great, you are confident, you know, you do all these things, that must mean that you don't struggle with mental health in any way. And I feel like that's a big part of why we need to have these conversations, because it's possible to be confident, it's possible to be successful, it's possible to like live your best life, but also in doing that you have to take care of your mental health. It's so imperative and important that we're taking care of our mental health every day of our life in order to really live our best life. So it's not just like a kind of sort of best life. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. And that's kind of the cool thing. Just even thinking back to the definition of mental health, it's about balance. You're balancing your physical, your emotional, your spiritual, your mental health. So it's really finding it. So even though you're like, well, hey, I do all these things and people are kind of surprised that I have anxiety, well, it's actually totally normal. Because you just need to find that perfect balance, that kind of, I don't know, like what triggers it. And maybe it's also that we need to also have these conversations and not dismiss someone when they say, hey, I have anxiety. I'm saying, oh, that's not a real thing, because it's a totally real thing. I remember once I was at my doctor's office, and I'm epileptic, and I was just telling her sometimes, when I feel really stressed, that's when, I feel them coming on, and she automatically was like, stress isn't real. Stress is not a real thing. Like, she automatically... But you see what I mean? So I was like, wait, what? Because to her, it was like, well, you can control stress. You should be getting your 8 hours of sleep and this and that. And it was, to her, it was very structured. But it's like, when you have stress, you have stress. Like, I've had a seizure the day of an exam just because of how stressed I was. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there was a lack of sleep. So it's interesting how you have this medical professor telling you, mm-hmm. oh, stress isn't real. It's something that's human-made. So same with you. When you're saying, mm-hmm. I have anxiety and someone's telling you that's not real, well, that's where we're getting to the root of mental health right now. Mm-hmm. Is people telling us things aren't real just because maybe they don't experience it, mm-hmm. or they just control certain things in their life a little differently. Where I'm naturally just very disorganized, so of course I'm going to be a little more stressed than the average person. Mm-hmm. And you do a lot, right? Mm-hmm. You put yourself out there, you do videos, you do workshops, you deal with clients, mm-hmm. you're doing a lot, so it's almost natural mm-hmm. for you to ever feel anxiety, not mm-hmm. to dismiss it. So maybe that's really mm-hmm. the point of this video is, let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about the stigma around it. Mm-hmm. Let's really get you guys comfortable and know that this really is a safe space, especially with me and Tanya. We want to mm-hmm. create that safer space. So it's totally cool to talk about mental health and talk about things that you might be facing and kind of learn ways to cope with it.
Mm-hmm. And knowing that it can happen to anyone. It's not this thing where only mental health is a spectrum. Everyone is dealing, just like you have physical health that you're constantly dealing with, everyone is constantly dealing with some type of mental health. And we're all on a spectrum somewhere in terms of what things might trigger us to be in a space of having anxiety or having depression, or some folks who may have more clinical illnesses around their mental health. It's definitely something that can happen to anyone. We're just talking about this prior. I had brought up TT Branch, who was the founder of Miss Jessie's, had committed suicide in 2014. And I remember when I found that out, I was shocked. That was when I was just starting out my business, and I was just like in the process of like having the thought of what that would mean for me to be a Black woman entrepreneur. And I think that we have this idea that when we attain financial success or mm-hmm. we attain fame or notoriety, that we don't have to deal with those things anymore. That like sadness or pain or whatever, those things, it goes away. And we tend to think like, once I make enough, like I won't be worried anymore. But that's why it's so important for us to like take care of our mental health now and build those habits now of the things that we need to care for our mental health, similar to like how we would care for our body, because it doesn't go away. And for me, that was a reality check when that happened. I was like, okay, this person has attained all this success, but she was still struggling with mental health in the ways that she was. And I don't know what her internal process was that really brought her to the difficult place that she was in, that made her not want to live anymore. But for me, it was just a reality that like, just because someone is confident or successful, it doesn't mean that they don't have struggles around their mental health. It doesn't mean that it just goes away. And it's important for us to care for our mental health now as we're trying to build these empires that we're all trying to build.
Exactly, right? So it's ultimately that no one's immune to mental health. No one like, hey, just because you have $2 million, you'll be okay. That's not what we're saying at all. It's that mm-hmm. everyone will experience this. And it's about opening this up. Let's talk about it, and let's find ways to accept it in society versus dismiss it. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up an interesting point around like self-awareness and how that plays into our mental health, and how being more self-aware is part of building those strategies that we need to build in order to better understand ourselves and better care for ourselves. Ultimately, is how I understand it to be.
Totally. And I think we're actually going to get into entrepreneurship next video, but one of the key strengths of being an entrepreneur, as well as just a business owner and a leader, is being very self-aware. And I couldn't help but tie that into mental health, is really understanding yourself, understanding who you are as a person, your personality type, who you work best with, what type of things you need in life. Because naturally, some people will place certain things higher in life as their priority. Like when you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We have to have certain things covered. Our basic needs, our sexual needs, our financial needs, our comfort, our friends, our security. We have all those amazing needs that need to be covered. But at the same time, we got to think of, what about our mental support? Do we have that person that we can call on and say, I've been having such a rough day, how do I let this out? And what are some of our ways that we cope with daily stresses? If I've had a crazy stressful week and then I have to go in and do more of that work, I want to know that I have my releases and I have that person I could vent to. I can let that energy out. I can let that anger and that frustration. Or like for me, I'm a painter. So sometimes when I'm just really full of anger or emotion, I'm like, let me just get this out. Because sometimes too, if I'm really holding on to anger, I can talk as much as I need to, but until I sit down and just be able to draw it out almost, or just let those creative juices flow out, that's sometimes my way to cope with kind of the daily stresses. So it's understanding who you are as a person, your personality type, what you need to improve, and what you need to strive in life. What is it that you need? What is that emotional, like that's the stability that you're looking for that can take you to the next level and make you a better person? And it's interesting because as Tanya was mentioning about TT, I actually had a friend who we're really good friends and we're always talking about everything under the sun. And then one day she starts talking about mental health with me. And this was actually a few days ago. And she kept apologizing. And I love her to death. And I'm like, why are you apologizing? And she's like, I know, but it's mental health and it's depressing. I said, no, it's not depressing. So there was this natural approach she did with it, like as if talking about it was bad or as if she was burdening me by talking about mental health. And I think that's, again, we're going back to that root of that stigma in society about talking about it or just sharing our experiences. It's not a bad thing. It's totally normal. But there's the fear of someone saying, well, that's not real. Stress and anxiety is not real. Or there's that fear, like with my friend, who's like, oh, I'm sorry to burden you, or I'm sorry to bring this up. And I'm like, no, let's bring this up. And we actually ended up talking about Linkin Park and the lead singer who had actually recently committed suicide, and how he was talking about it in an interview of what it feels like in his mind. And, when he's alone, that's when it really gets to him, when he's by himself.
This place right here, this skull between my ears, that is a bad neighborhood. And I should not be in there alone. I can't be in there by myself.
What are you talking about?
It's insane.
Crazy,
it's crazy in here. This is a bad place for me to be by myself. And so when I'm in that, like my whole life gets thrown off. Like if I'm in there, like I don't say nice things to myself. Like there's another Chester in there that's like wants to take me down. And so, and I find that it could be whether it's substances or whether it's behavior or whether it's like depressive stuff or whatever it is, like if I'm not like actively like getting out of myself and being with other people, like being a dad, being a husband, being a bandmate, like being a friend, helping someone out, like if I'm out of myself, I'm great. If I'm inside all the time, I'm horrible. I'm a mess.
So again, tying that back into self-awareness and really loving yourself, self-love is absolute key, but also understanding who you are, what you need. What are those needs that you know you will need emotionally to feel more balanced in your life? So, it's really just creating this safe space, joining this conversation, and really getting into self-awareness and who you are. That's going to make you a better person.
And as always, we have points we want to leave you with. So I have 3 points that I use in my own life to support me when I'm really having difficult times, particularly around mental health. And my first thing is stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. And I think that applies to everything in life, to be honest. But what I mean by stay ready so you ain't got to get ready is if you know that you're a person who may have depressive episodes, or you know that you're a person who struggles with anxiety, from my experiences at least, I don't feel that way all the time. I feel that way sometimes. So for example, I have days where like my anxiety is all-time high, where getting out of bed is way too much and it's like actually feels difficult for me. But I have days where I don't feel that way and I can get up and I'm like, let's get it done. And on my days where I feel okay, I try to work to my maximum potential. So when I say stay ready so you ain't gotta get ready, it's like, what do you need to do in the front to prepare for what's gonna come next? That also can look like if you have a friend, a best friend, someone really close, it's harder when you're actually in the moment of feeling that way to reach out to somebody. But when you're feeling like you're having one of the better days, having that conversation, being like, hey, sometimes I go through this thing and sometimes I need support and it might look like this, and having a system set up around what that person could do to support you. So it might be, if you have a roommate, best friend, whoever, being like, if I send you this emoji, because like, you know, sometimes that's all we have energy to do is send like one emoji, and be like, this means that this is where I'm at. And sometimes support looks like, you know, saying you love me. So I was going through a really hard breakup that really like had me flat out. And one of my homegirls, who's amazing, but also happens to be a therapist, so she's also doubly amazing. And all she did for like a week was like send me heart emojis every day. And that was just her way of being like, I love you and I'm with you. And that, I can't tell you in words like how helpful that was for me. But us having a plan ahead of time is what made it easier in the actual moments that were difficult, because I knew what to do. So I definitely feel like stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. We can talk about business, we can talk about life, but I feel like it also applies to talking about mental health and ways to prepare for the difficult days around mental health.
It's actually ironic because I have a friend, we had our first little fight. It's kind of cute though when I think about it. But I remember her telling me, and she's like, Christina, some days I just need you to tell me this will work. Some days I don't need you to say, oh my God, how's this? Because I can actually get paranoid. Mm-hmm. She's like, I just need you to say, you got this. Mm-hmm. So she was almost setting me up. You know, in future, it's not that, you know, for me to get anxious, or if she tells me something's not so, I get really, oh my God, how's this going to come together? It's her saying, Christina, all I want from you is to say, this will work. This will come together. And just giving her that extra support. So here's that time where she's giving me that heads up, what she needs of me to be a better friend.
Doing what you can do when you can do it. And my second point is definitely the piece around finding your support systems. And support systems can look like a lot of things. It could look like friends. It can look like a partner. I also would suggest, and this is again from my own personal experiences, I have seen therapists. I have had sessions with counselors. I have had sessions with spiritual healers. I have seen shamans. I'm saying this to say that support system can look like many different things, but finding someone who speaks to the ways that you need to be spoken to, speak to your heart in the way you need to be spoken to, that you can connect with and have honest and transparent conversations with ongoing. So you can have that ongoing support, that there's someone that you know you can call, you can talk to when those days that get really rough really hit. I find that has been one of the most helpful things for me. And it doesn't happen all the time, but there's certain folks that I know I can go to, whether it's every few months or whatever it is, to sit down. And it could be a mentor. There's so many possibilities of what support could look like. Family, but figuring out where you feel most comfortable to be most honest about where you're at and what you're feeling, and get the support that you need around it.
Exactly. And there's so many hotlines. There's so many things. And I think everybody in life should at least have that one person they know they can call, that they can say, I'm having a really rough day. I know I'm like that for one of my really good friends right now, where she has told me, Christina, I have been thinking about suicide for the past few months. And sometimes I just always tell her, look, I will be there. I promise you, I will keep my phone at night because I will be there. And just that reassurance that she knows she is not alone. So although there's all this other support for her, I always want to make sure I'm going to be that person for you to answer, to talk to listen. And I think everybody, if you are experiencing any type of, or just in general, everyone needs a person they can talk to and speak to. And there are so many great resources as well. So definitely take advantage of those, not to build it up and keep pain or tension inside of you. So really find ways to let that out. Find ways to cope with it now. Because I know you were saying that earlier. Find ways to do it now before it escalates or it gets bigger or gets to a point where you can't control it anymore.
And my third point is figure out your strengths. So what I mean by figuring out your strengths is figure out what you're really good at, what you really love to do, and what brings you joy, and do a lot more of it. And I know that seems like such a simple thing, but sometimes we try to push ourselves to do all the things that we don't actually want to be doing, to work jobs that we don't want to be at, to just live a life that doesn't fill us with joy. And then we're like, why don't I feel happiness? And it's hard. And I'm not trying to say it's easy. It's not. It takes a little bit of work, but it's so helpful to really start to cultivate a life that you love, and that is in line with your strengths as a person, the things that feed you, the things that make you feel good, and the things that will build your confidence, because you feel like you're like lighting up when you're doing them. And doing more of that incrementally will start to change what your daily life looks like, you know?
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
I mean, with my example with painting, sometimes it's just because I creatively am drained and I need to find it. And that's why me and my best friend actually do it together. We will play YouTube videos. We'll play covers.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Yeah, like they're so corny, but it's like this reassurance. Like my phone is God knows where. Everything's turned off. We will be in like my garage or the backyard for hours. And we barely say anything to each other because we're both just letting out our creative juices. And we're just finding that time. So again, if it's painting, if it's singing, if it's writing, whatever it is, it's that idea of giving yourself that time to say, I'm going to work on me. I'm going to do something I love. I'm going to do something I enjoy. It could be shopping. It could truly be anything. But I think it definitely is very important that you find what it is that you like to do and that brings you happiness. And you make sure you find time to do it because you deserve it.
For sure.
So some of my...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, some of my 3 points I would love to leave you guys with is ultimately to find what makes you happy. Don't be afraid of that. Find ways to cope. And coping doesn't necessarily mean, ranting, but just finding your support system. Finding people you can trust and you can say, hey, this is what's on my mind, or this is what's been bothering me, or this is what I'm really struggling with, because life is not easy. If it was easy, then, there's highs and there's lows. That's just how it is. So ultimately, you need to find a strong support system. And lastly is to be self-aware. Take that time to get to know yourself. As silly as that sounds, to learn about your habits, to ask the people closest to you, what do I do that is terrible? We all have those bad traits to us, and no one's bad, no one's perfect, but it's ultimately just saying, what can I improve on? And constantly striving to get better. So it's ultimately, finding time for yourself, being self-aware, and creating that beautiful support system that you deserve.
And I just want to add self-love. Not to say that it will make all the struggles of life go away, but I think that self-love is when we start learning to love ourselves for who we are rather than who we wish we were. And I think sometimes what happens with mental health, when we are struggling, we're like, oh, I wish I didn't have this, or I wish I could be different, or I wish I wasn't struggling, I wish I didn't have anxiety, I wish I didn't feel this way. And we should all over ourselves. We wish everything away. And sometimes self-love looks like being like, this is something that I deal with, and these are the ways that I cope with it. These are the ways I care for myself through it. These are the ways I love myself through it.
Love it. So I hope you guys are able to take something away from that. Can join in the conversation. Please comment below. We always love to hear from you guys. We are going to have 2 call to actions, and our first one there will be some quizzes below. There will be some links, and there will be personality assessment tests. So if you haven't done these before, I highly recommend you do them. And it's just a good way to understand who you are, your personality type. There's like a color quiz, which is, what color are you? Are you more emotional? Are you more organized? Are you more introverted? Those little things will actually help you a lot more than you can imagine.
I'm orange blue. I just want to share that because I'm like, I love that test. Yeah.
So we're gonna leave those below for you to do. We're also gonna leave some clips. Definitely have some things that have happened in the media, some of the celebrities we've mentioned, for you to look for yourself. And
our another part of the call to action is figuring out who that person is that you feel comfortable talking to your mental health about, and talk to them. like really have an honest, truthful, vulnerable conversation with this person, and just let them know where you're at and let them know how they can better support you with the difficult moments that may come up, and like what loving you looks like, and just talk to them. And I would also suggest letting them talk to you and like having an open dialogue conversation, so you have a buddy and a support that both of y'all got each other.
Exactly. So, let's have the conversation. Let's talk, literally. Let's have those conversations and enjoy the journey, guys, because that's what this is all about, enjoying this crazy journey we call life.
Okay. So thank you for watching this week, and we will be back next week, and we'll be talking all things entrepreneurship and what confidence looks like in that realm.
Yay. All right. See you guys.
Peace.